Let's be real for a second. Most startups, they're destined to fail. It's a tough, tough world out there. But what if you had a playbook, a guide to help you beat those odds? Well, that's what we're doing today. We are building the ultimate startup survival guide.
Okay, so let's just dive right in by talking about the biggest threat, the #1 killer of new companies. Now, I bet you're thinking it's running out of money, right? That's what everybody thinks. And look, you're not wrong, but that's actually #2 on the list. The real killer is something way more fundamental, and it catches so many founders completely off guard.
So check this out. CB Insights did this big analysis. They looked at over 100 failed startups, and what they found was kind of shocking. A whopping 42% of them died for the exact same reason.
That's it. No market need. They built something that nobody actually wanted. It's the startup equivalent of building this gorgeous, state-of-the-art ship right in the middle of the Sahara Desert. All that time, all that passion, all that money, for something nobody was going to buy.
So how do you avoid building that ship in the desert? Well, this explainer is your roadmap. We're going to cover why most startups fail. Then we'll get into the lean startup method that can save you. We'll talk about building your first product, what metrics you should actually be looking at, the legal stuff you just can't ignore, and finally, planning your end game.
All right, so if building something nobody wants is the disease, what's the cure? It's a really powerful philosophy called the lean startup.
And don't let the name fool you. Lean isn't about being cheap. It's about being smart. It's about being incredibly efficient by getting rid of waste. And what's the biggest waste of all? Building something nobody wants.
At the very heart of the lean startup is this simple, elegant feedback loop. It's 3 steps. First, you build a small version of your idea. Then, you measure how real customers respond to it. And finally, you learn from that data to decide what to do next. It's that simple, and it's that powerful.
This quote from Eric Ries just nails it. It's a huge mindset shift. See, your job isn't just to build stuff. Your job is to learn what the right stuff to build is as fast as you possibly can. Okay, so we've got the philosophy down. It makes sense, right? But how do we actually put it into practice? How do we go from that idea in our head to something real we can show people? Well, it doesn't start with code. It starts with clarity. You have to get obsessed with the problem you're solving. You need to really dig in, do your research, and figure out what makes your solution special, what makes it different from everything else out there. And here's the key. You don't build the whole dream product at once. You build an MVP, a minimum viable product. Think of it this way. If your dream is to build a car, you start by building a skateboard. It's the absolute smallest thing you can create that solves the core problem and gets that learning loop started. Okay, awesome. You've built your skateboard, your MVP. You put it out there. But building is just 1/3 of the loop, remember? How do you actually know if it's working? If anyone cares? Well, that's where we get to the measure part. And more importantly, measuring the right things. So let's talk about your startup's dashboard. Because there are a million numbers you could track, but only a tiny handful of them are actually going to act as your compass and tell you if you're going in the right direction. The first rule here is to learn the difference between vanity metrics and actionable metrics. Vanity metrics, like total downloads, they look great in a press release, they make you feel good, but they don't help you make decisions. Actionable metrics, like how many of those users are actually coming back every month, that tells you if you're building something people value. So what are these key actionable metrics? Well, first up, you've got LTV, or lifetime value. This is so important. It forces you to ask, over the entire time someone is a customer, how much profit will they generate for us?
And the other side of that coin is your CAC, or customer acquisition cost. And you have to be brutally honest with yourself here. How much does it really cost you in marketing, sales, discounts, everything to get one new customer in the door?
And when you put those two together, you get the absolute golden rule of a sustainable business. Your LTV has to be greater than your CAC. It's simple math. If you're spending more to get a customer than they will ever be worth to you, you don't have a business. You have a leaky bucket. Okay, a great product, healthy metrics, that's fantastic. But it's all built on quicksand if you don't have a solid legal foundation. Now, I know this isn't the sexy part of startups, but trust me, getting this right is absolutely critical. You can really break down the legal journey into 3 main stages. There are things you need to do before you even form a company, then the actual incorporation process, and then a whole bunch of stuff you have to do right after to make sure you're protected. And there are a few things here that are just non-negotiable. You have to have those tough conversations about who gets what equity early on.
You absolutely must assign all the intellectual property, the code, the designs, everything, to the company, not to the individual founders. And you've got to handle tax filings like the 83B election, which, by the way, has a super strict 30-day deadline and can save you a fortune later.
All right, you've done it. You found a real need, you're using the build, measure, learn loop to grow, and your legal house is in order. Now you've got to start thinking about the horizon. What's the end game here? What are you building towards?
And look, while the big, flashy IPO gets all the headlines, that's only one of many possible outcomes. Maybe your goal is to be acquired by a bigger company. Or maybe you'll use a newer path, like a direct listing. You might even decide the best thing for you is to stay private and grow a profitable business on your own terms.
So, there you have it. You've got the survival guide. You have the framework, but it all comes back to that first, most important step, doesn't it? By focusing on a real need, by learning constantly, and by building a solid foundation, you're not just dodging failure, you're charting a real course for success. You have the map, so the only question left is, what problem will you solve?